Hi everyone, it's Plastic EP here. Let me tell you, I have a very special VIP guest just for everybody out there in the world, and his name is Dave Harries. And I'll tell you what, in 1969, he was EMI technical engineer, and he was the man there on the rooftop in 1969 with the Beatles. And I've got so many questions to ask you. Just tell me what that experience was like, Dave.
Well, it was fantastic at the time, but it was very hectic, and we didn't have a lot of notice in order to get the equipment together because they wanted to move to Apple Studios, to their own studios, and Magic Alex had built them a new console. So we tried it, but it wasn't really in keeping with the way we worked. So we brought in two consoles from EMI Studios, which we managed to, Keith Slaughter and I was the other technical engineer. We managed to lash them up together and use them with an 8-track machine from EMI so that we could record the Beatles 8-track with Glyn Johns. And it was one of Alan Parsons' very first sessions as well.
Can I ask you, Dave, how many tracks did you have in total? And I need to know, were your mixing desks downstairs in the basement in Apple, and you had cables running to the roof? Is that how you did it?
Yes, we did. Yeah, that's exactly how we did it.
I'm just going to ask you, Dave, how you recorded the Beatles. What desks did you do for that particular rooftop show?
Well, we used a Red 51, which was the same mixer, not the same one, but physically the same mixer as in number 2 at Abbey Road there the Beatles used. And we used a Red 37, which was an earlier version of the same desk. They were just 8 inputs, 4 outputs. So we needed 2 of them to get 8 outputs so we could run them with the 8-track machine.
So how many tracks in total did you have at that point in 1969?
8.
Only 8. But then what? You can bounce as many tracks as you want?
Oh, yeah, you could do that, but we didn't do that on the session. We just used the 8, as I remember anyway. You'll have to ask Glyn.
You had these recording desks down in the basement and you ran the cable up to the roof. Is that right?
Yes, we did. We ran the cable up to the roof. We also ran some speakers up to the roof that we got together so that we could, spread the sound down into the street. Quite an installation, and, it was very short notice.
That's what I want to know now. Can you tell me how long the cable was? This is a great question. From the basement to the roof, how long was the actual cable?
Well, I don't know. It must have been about 50 feet.
And what I'm saying is that didn't deteriorate in the sound at all, did it, from the mixing desk down below in the basement?
I couldn't tell. I wouldn't know, but it didn't seem to. No, it's nice, crispy sound, yeah.
Dave, when you were in the basement, you were recording in the basement, not on the roof. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Who else was there on the desk recording the last performance of the Beatles on the roof, the rooftop concert?
That was Glyn Johns, the engineer, the same engineer that did the Rolling Stones and the Eagles and all sorts. He came in for those sessions and he sort of produced it with George Martin.
And this is between us. We know now that was the last time the Beatles played live. But no one knew that was going to be their last performance. Is that true?
Well, I think they possibly did, but I don't think anybody else did. Nobody knew they were going to give a last performance, did they? Because they said they were packing up touring and going just in the studio.
Yeah, I agree. Now, what's interesting to me is before they were recorded on the rooftop, what was the brief for this job? When did you first hear that the Beatles are going to record on Apple? And I need to know, did you have a song list? Did you have an idea how long they'd be on the roof recording?
No, we didn't. And the other thing was, of course, initially it was going to be a concert right from the start, but we didn't know where or when. And that was where they started at Twickenham Studios rehearsing. That's when we got involved because they suddenly decided they wanted some mics and other gear to start rehearsing with. But there wasn't an intention to do a recording, although it was all being filmed live at the time, as you know. So then they moved, well, then their studio was finished in Apple. They moved into there and they carried on recording. And, but then it became a recording as much as a rehearsal for a concert. the venue was not booked. There was nothing, but they were rehearsing for a concert. As far as I know, nobody knew when or where at the time. And then they decided they might go abroad to do a concert. They might go to, all sorts of places we envisaged. They started booking standby generators for them to record on desert islands and stuff like that. But in the end, they said, oh, let's go on the roof. So they were going to go on the roof on the 28th, but it was raining. So we did it on the 29th.
Were you close to any of the Beatles?
Oh, yeah. I mean, of course, we were close to all of them. We worked with them for years and years and years. So, yeah, of course, they were like mates. They were great.
No, that's right. Who are you closest to?
I don't know, really. They were all the same. Possibly Paul.
Okay. Now, I want to say, how did you deal with the wind? It was a very windy day. How did you deal with the wind on the microphones?
Yeah, well, it didn't seem to was a real problem. I can tell you what happened. Alan Parsons was the tape op, and Keith Slaughter, the chap I was with, realized it was a bit windy, and ladies' tights were quite good for putting over microphones and just stopping that wind. They didn't muffle the sound, but they deflected the wind away. So Keith sent him up to Marks and Spencer's to get some ladies' tights. So when the woman says to him, oh, yes, we got some ladies' tights. So what size do you want? And he said, well, just big enough to get over a 47, which was the name of the mic.
We call them stockings here.
Yeah, stockings. Yeah, well, it's the same. Well, and then also, of course, we put over the vocal mics because they were just hired in because we wanted small vocal mics because they didn't want big ones in their faces when they're doing a concert. So we hired in those small microphones, and then we had to put plastic foam over them because of the wind. And you can actually see where we quickly put it on with a bit of sticky tape. You can see that in the film.
With the amplifiers, they were using Fenders, American amps. How did you convert them to be able to use them on UK power?
Oh, well, I mean, they've all got 110 volt transformers. You just plug them into 110 and plug them into the mains and off you go.
Where did you get the power to run to the roof? Where did they get it from? The floor underneath?
Yeah, I guess so. I can't remember, to be honest, but I guess so, because the film crew were up there as well, of course. They had lights and stuff, I guess, and they previously scaffolded the whole roof out to make it safe so people wouldn't fall off. But I mean, people down in the street couldn't see who it was, you couldn't see. If you were on one of the adjoining rooftops, you could see who it was. And the police, when they came up, they didn't know who it was. They just thought it was a noise. And I've Ken Wolf, my mate, I still see him for lunch occasionally. He was one of the coppers. He was 21. And he said, we didn't know it was the Beatles. And we came up there and there it was the Beatles. And we said, well, we can't, because the sergeant had told them to go and stop the noise. So they went up there and they saw it was the Beatles. They said, well, we can't stop this. And then the sergeant himself came up and said, oh, blimey, it's the Beatles. We better go. So they went.
Did you know beforehand if there was a plan, if the police came to arrest them, did John say, let them arrest us? It'd be great for the film?
Well, probably, yes, I think. Well, I don't know. Yeah, probably. That was the sort of thing they would do. Yeah, of course. It would be great for the film, but they didn't arrest them, although they threatened to. When they wouldn't let them in, they were hammering on the door saying, if you don't let us in, we'll arrest everybody in the building.
When they came in that front door, did they come straight for the basement to see where you were?
No, I think they went up on the roof.
Was the door closed, was it? So you wouldn't know that was the recording basement there where you were?
No, we heard them knocking on the door. We knew they were trying to get in, but we didn't know much about it because we were downstairs working.
Did you know this was happening a month before, 5 days before? How many days before?
About probably 5 days before, maybe less.
And what did you think? At EMI, were they talking, oh, we can't wait to go on the roof? What were you hearing in the 5 days, the planning before the show?
Well, we were hearing all sorts of suggestions about where to go and do it. And that's what I say, we were going to some sort of Roman amphitheater, and we were going to some other places, and somewhere where there wouldn't be many people who would know them, I think was the idea. But they were going to play and do a concert, but it may have all been in their different heads because they couldn't agree where to do it, and then suddenly somebody said, well, let's do it on the roof.
With the recordings, how long were the recordings? For, in other words, did you have hours of recordings?
Oh yeah, 50 hours of, 50 hours of film recording. But no, I mean, we would only have recorded quite a few. There'd be outtakes and stuff because they ran through stuff, and then we used some of the roof stuff and some of the studio stuff for the final record.
Now, with putting the cable to the roof, can I ask you, did that take a day or 2 days prior to organise?
Not that long now, because we were used to going out. We used to go out. We used to record in places like the Albert Hall. You're miles away from the auditorium. And we just used to run the cables up. And if they weren't long enough, we used to join them up. We didn't have great big long cables like the TV companies do, those big triaxes on drums, which they don't need anymore, of course, but they used to.
When you think back and the sound came through with the Beatles on the first song, what feeling did you get? This is great, or this sound is great?
What, you mean when they're on the roof?
Yeah, when they're on the roof.
And no, we would have thought, thank God for that. It's all working. That would be you wouldn't think about what they were recording and what great it was. We just wanted to make sure that we got it all. That's why I had to go up on the roof a couple of times to make sure they were still on mics, that the mics hadn't blown over, or that, in front of the guitar amps or whatever, or that they were still on the vocal mics and, still doing it, because you couldn't stop and tell them. Although there were some retakes, obviously.
How many people were in the Apple building when they were recording? I just want to say, our good friend Leslie Cavendish was on the floor below them, under their feet.
Yeah. Right. Well, I don't know how many. I mean, I was just blind to anything apart from getting this recording done. You know what I mean?
Now tell me, once the session was over, did the Beatles come straight downstairs to hear what you recorded, the sound?
Yeah, I think they must have done. I don't recall, to be honest. I think we were all just, whew, that's good, done it, because it was quite an achievement. Think of it. It was a hell of a thing to do. It was a live gig with not rehearsals, only rehearsals down in the studio. We didn't know if it would all work. What if one of the 47s packed up on the guitar amp, we'd have to go up and change it and stop the whole thing, but it didn't happen. And also, what I was very pleased about was the speakers we had in those days. You didn't have the big PA systems that you got today. We just had sort of loud studio playback speakers, but we had 4 of them. We beamed them down to the street, and they could actually hear it down in Piccadilly Circus, which is about half a mile away. So I was quite pleased that they actually could hear it there, because they all came. That's when, because Ken Wolfe was on point duty, traffic duty in Piccadilly Circus, and there's one of those police lights there, and he saw it starting to flash. So when he answered it, and his sergeant said, "Hey boy, can you hear that noise?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, go and stop it then." So they could hear it, in Piccadilly Circus, which I was quite pleased about, because I never thought it'd be loud enough.
But what about the people down in the street? How loud would it have been for them?
Quite loud down in the street, apparently.
Well, it disrupted all the businesses, didn't it? And everyone came out to see what's going on.
Of course, yeah, it was great. That's just what we wanted to do, what they wanted to do. They wanted to stop the whole of West London. If we had the speakers you can get now, we could have done.
Did any of the Beatles come up to you before you did the session and said, "Don't worry, Dave, we're going to give them a show"? Or did anyone say, "We're going up there, right, boys, we're ready to go"? What were you hearing?
Of course they did.
Before they went on the roof?
Oh, yeah, they were all keyed up. But the problem with going up on the roof was it was blooming cold that day. It was, end of January in London. It's not like it is in Sydney or Melbourne. It's the opposite. It's freezing cold.
And that's why they're wearing the big jackets.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Ringo was wearing his wife's jacket.
The red one.
That red one. Yeah.
If you look back on this event, and I didn't know anything about it, like future generations of young Beatle fans are now, take me through things that you thought were very important at that time?
Very important at that time was probably the fact that it was different. Everything was being filmed. They weren't privately in the studio. They were letting the film company record and film everything they were doing. So they, even though maybe they were niggling or they were arguing or maybe putting things together or discussing stuff, it all got recorded. There was 50 hours of it filmed and recorded. So that was absolutely new. And of course, all the rehearsals and the outtakes were recorded then as well. So, I mean, that was, that was quite a thing to actually take that on. I'm not sure any other band has done that quite the same. They've filmed days of sessions, but not the complete thing was amazing. And it was so good that they did it, really, wasn't it? Because you now got an indelible record of the last released LP, but not the last recorded LP.
Now, what do you think about all this footage now for the new Peter Jackson documentary, 3-part, 2-hour each series that's coming out in November? What do you think about that? Because they're going to show the whole concert, aren't they?
Yeah, they're going to show the whole thing. Yeah, Straits. Yeah, I mean, they deserve it. They're the best band. They are, really. That's the other thing too, that they were quite exceptional because you could work in that studio for months on an album and nobody heard one note of the album. Nobody knew what was coming out. They were completely different in that they just did singles and they did LPs. They didn't put the singles on the LPs, not till afterwards. So, and we would work on the album for months and months and nobody would hear it. And then it would come out on the Friday and every radio station in the world would play it. I mean, where else has that been? Where else has that happened? Fantastic. That's my difference for them.
Of course. Can I ask when you started working with the Beatles? Like, what song do you remember you started working with the Beatles? How early back?
Oh, it was Revolver, but I can't remember which song it was. I can't remember at all. Sorry.
What about Sgt. Pepper?
Oh, yeah, we did that. Yeah, remember that. Yeah, of course I remember that.
What was that like? Tell me about that.
Well, it was just originally the first track they did was Strawberry Fields, which I did a lot of work on. I did, part of the recording of that was that I did because Jeff and George weren't there. So they suddenly wanted to record this song. So I recorded it for them and everything. And they used half of it and then cut it together with another half they recorded separately. So, and that was really the start of their sort of Sgt. Pepper, going into Wild Things. And it was just, nobody knew it was going to be a great album, but it turned out to be a great album. And I think so did Abbey Road.
I think that song Strawberry Fields, and John said, I like the first part of that and the second one of the other one. Can you put them together? And then where did you match it? With the chicken or where the rooster's crying? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, the problem was, of course, they were slightly different keys. So we had to slow the machine down as we came to the edit so that it would, it would match tonal wise.
How amazing was that? To be there to do that. That was your job.
It was lucky, not amazing. It was a bit of luck that it all worked. It always worked for them anyway. It's all a bit of luck. It was all going along. They'd start with a few songs and then the whole thing would slowly come together. Oh, let's try this. Oh, let's do that. As they were going along. It wasn't all, we're getting on that 10 o'clock in the morning and come out at midday like they used to. It was all sort of everything strung together. Let's make it different. And they had some great ideas and they're great songwriters. Blimey, they still stand up today, don't they?
Were you upset that they didn't put Strawberry Fields on the Sgt. Pepper album? I reckon they should have.
It was a single, but they did. It actually didn't get to number one. It was a single. What was the other side?
The other side was the A side, Penny Lane. And what happens is they only put it out as a single. And they didn't put them on the album. I reckon they should have put them on the album too.
Well, yeah, but they didn't. So anyway, but it wasn't number one, Engelbert Humperdinck got to number one and beat them to it.
With Please Release Me. That's right.
That's
he stopped their run of 13 number ones.
Yeah. he's quite pleased about that, Engelbert. He thought that was good.
I'll just ask you now, what are the songs you worked with? Because I'm just fascinated. Tell me some other songs that you recorded that stand out in your mind.
Just about all of them, on and off, bits and pieces were worked on every single track on and off. Because, I wasn't the only one. There were other people working. So, there were quite a few joined in and did bits. So I wasn't the only one.
Anything you can tell me, Dave, about your experiences with the Beatles or George Martin?
George Martin was really the opposite to the Beatles in a way, because he was quite a sort of classy guy, and they were four lads from Liverpool. So there was that sort of amazing combination of people that produced this gear. And of course, George was a qualified musician, and they were just great musicians in a different way. So it worked. It all worked together. It was fascinating to see, because up to then he'd been doing comedy records and classical records, and suddenly he's launched with the Beatles, and he did such a fantastic job because he got this musician's ears all the time.
Did the Beatles have a lot of weight now at EMI recording sessions? Were they able now to say, we want to record as long as we want, we want to do what we want, and EMI said, do whatever you like?
Yes, they did. They certainly did. They didn't necessarily do what they liked because they didn't get the equipment they wanted that they knew was in other people's studios, because EMI were a bit slow in taking up new things like 8-track and everything else. And we had an 8-track machine on the White Album, but we weren't supposed to use it. But I went and got it and plugged it in, and we used it, knowing that it was the Beatles. And I wouldn't get bollocked for doing it, despite the fact if I'd done it for any other session, I'd have probably got the sack. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
Were you on Birthday and also back in the USSR?
Oh yeah, back on the USSR, I remember. Amazing song. Yeah, that's really good. They were all good,
Where did they get the sound of the plane at the start?
Oh, they used to take things off all sound effects records. There was EMI had an amazing sound effects library. So they used to nick bits off other people's records. They never knew. You didn't get plagiarized. I'm sure they didn't make anybody's tunes, but they took bits of people's records, and we used to get them out of the library and cut them up and run them backwards and all sorts of stuff. And it was fine. No one looked into it in those days. It all worked because most of the tapes were probably belonged to EMI anyway as a company. So I suppose it didn't matter so much as it would have done these days. People like these days were suing people. They love it, don't they?
Can I ask you now about any memories of like Brian Epstein? You saw him there with the Beatles?
No, I don't really remember him that much. He came in and he was just there, and because a lot of people used to come in on Beatles sessions that I never knew who they were. These people used to wander in and out all the time.
Tell me some of the other big artists that used to turn up to see their recording sessions and you knew who they were.
Well, no, I mean, they were only if they were invited. They were the big artists. I mean, if they would come in, like the Stones and all that, then they would. But I don't recall a lot of that going on, to be honest, because they kept it fairly stum that they were in the studio. I mean, they were up on the board as the Ventures. They weren't up on the board as the Beatles. That's how secure it was. You knew it was the Beatles, but it was written up on the program, which went round to all the departments as the Ventures. I think it was the Ventures. Yeah, one of them anyway. It wasn't the Beatles. I never saw the Beatles.
Ventures as a funny gag, so no one knew it was the Beatles recording. Is that what they did?
Yeah.
I never heard that story.
Oh yeah, it was on the EMI programs. I think it was the Ventures. I might be wrong. You could check that.
It wasn't Paul Ramon, was it, or the Moondogs?
No. No. No.
Can I ask you, did you do any Holly sessions? Any sessions with the Hollies?
Yeah, of course. Hollies did the Hollies live, and we used to do a lot of live recordings for the same artists as well. As it turned out, the Beatles as well. But it was, yeah, the Hollies were great, you know, Alan and that lot. And
Now, apart from the Beatles, who were your favourite artists that you recorded?
I think it probably was the Beatles. I mean, who else would it be? You know, I mean, we also did classical music, don't forget, big orchestral stuff and Joe Loss and orchestral stuff and everything all in the same room, you know. I mean, all that Joe Loss stuff and those big band stuff and, you know, Matt Monro, they were all done in the same room. Shirley Bassey, all those artists used to come in as well.
Dave, anything you can tell me about Abbey Road? Because that was the last album they actually recorded. So, I mean, what was that like?
They didn't all come in together. That's the most amazing thing. To me, it's their best album in my book. And it was the only one. Well, the last two albums were the only two that were recorded stereo. Everything else was recorded mono and then made stereo, well, in the same session, but afterwards, as a, you know, as an afterthought. But the two albums that were made stereo were the Let It Be and what's the name, Abbey Road. They were recorded stereo, so that in that way those two were different. It was all amazing, and I remember Abbey Road because that was the first one we did on the big TG desk. We got rid of the Red 51, which was the 4-channel desk, and we got a 16-channel, which was the 16-channel desk, which was the TG desk, which was made by EMI, specifically for EMI. And there are still quite a lot of those still in existence around the place. We took it, first of all, that same desk to Paris and did opera with it, then came back and put it in number 2, and it did Abbey Road. And it was just a different sound, but it's a very nice, beautifully made mixing console. And I remember Abbey Road because one day they did that bit, you know, with Polythene Pam and all that bit. And there was Her Majesty was in the middle of it. Was that the one?
Yeah,
right. And it was in the middle. And George said, oh, we should cut it out. See, we should cut out. So I went down to number 1. Now, I remember this as going down to number 1 with George and cutting out, right? I cut out Her Majesty out of this sequence, joined it back together. You can't hear where it came out. And then, as a matter of course, you always keep what you've cut out. Obviously, you don't throw it in the bin. So you put a bit of yellow leader on it, and then you put it at the end and just keep it on the same roll of tape. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I did that, and they listened to it. Yeah, fine. But that wasn't the master, right? Now, when the master came to be done, John Kurlander was on it. He was the engineer, the assistant on that one. And he just copied my cut and put it on the end exactly the same as I did, right? So that was it. And then when it was cut and went out, of course, that bit of tape was still on the end. So it ended up being cut in the run out of the record, as you know. But that was just one of those things. It wasn't intended. Oh, let's put it on there so it goes in the run out. They just left it there. So it just happened. But then when I went over to Los Angeles to Jeff Emmerich's funeral, and I sat next to Kurlander, and I said, here, I said, do you remember the Abbey Road? You know, I went down and cut. He said, no. He said, I did the demo cut. You did the final cut. I said, well, I don't remember it that way around, but that's what Kurlander said. So there you go. This is what we find. Confusion everywhere.
It's amazing. But you know what? I got to ask you, in those Abbey Road sessions, were you there when John Lennon was lying on the floor with a microphone and singing lying on the floor?
Oh, yeah, all that stuff we did. Yeah, they put his microphone, somebody put his microphone in well, I won't say what it was in, but it was in a rubber thing in a pot of water to sound a bit different, you know. Well, we tried all sorts of things because of those days. You didn't have all these horrible plugins and things. You had to make your own effects up with the sound.
I heard that John wasn't happy with his voice. Is that true, that rumor?
No, it wasn't that. No, he had a great voice. I think he just wanted it to sound different for different things. I think to suit the record, to suit his idea of the song. Jeff Emmerich was a great engineer, by the way. He was really good as well, and very, very sort of, you know, everything had to be perfect. He was just just pedantic like that. And that's why the sound is so incredibly good on a lot of them. But, you know, when I did it differently to him, and he moaned at me for doing it wrong. But I mean, that's what he said.
Now, Dave, I've got to ask you this, right? Because it's very important. Were you recording I Am the Walrus?
Did I record it? No, I think that was Ken Scott.
Were you there, though, in the session or not?
Yeah, probably, yes. And when we put the strings on, yeah.
And what did you like about it when it goes oompa oompa, stick it up your jumper? I mean, I'm just saying, I'm Australian, and I know what a jumper is. If you talk to the Americans, they'll tell you it's a pullover. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, stick it. It wouldn't rhyme.
And you know the thing, I've got to tell you something. When that came out in 1967 here in Australia, I'm telling you, I'm not lying. I remember being in elementary school. We called it state school because we're under the British Commonwealth. And I'm telling you, that song was like the aliens put it out. There was nothing like it. Nothing like it.
Cool. No, I know. Well, that was Ken Scott when he took over. That was like virtually his first session.
I just want to say, when we go back to the Rooftop concert, is there anything after the concert you remember? Like, in other words, how long did it take to mix down the sound?
Well, I don't know, because to mix it down, it was done separately, wasn't it? It was done. Phil Spector and Peter Baum was the engineer, and that was I'd already left EMI then, and went to Air with George. So I wasn't there for that mix down and for putting the choir on and all that stuff.
And also got to say, working at Air when George Martin was an independent producer, how great was that?
Oh, it was fantastic. We just had this right in the middle of the city, right at Oxford Circus on the 4th floor. And we're just a hit factory, that place. One after the other, hit after hit after hit. Far more hits than Abbey Road did in the same period.
Do you remember which ones of the Beatles came through there too? Did they come and work with George there?
Yeah, Paul did a lot. Paul did several albums with Ringo as well. But John didn't. I don't think he may have come up. I can't remember, to be honest with you. And George, but certainly Paul did several really good albums, as you know, with Jeff and George. You've
obviously got a lot of gold records up there on the wall. Where are the gold records from? What sessions? Just if you.
Oh, and they're not from me. They're from Montserrat. We had a studio in the West Indies, and when it closed, I managed to get some of them that people hadn't nicked already. So I took them and got them here. My favourite one is where is it? It'll be this one. Which is
which one's that? Tell us.
Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see perfect. What's that?
Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits.
How great's that? Any others there you can show us? Yeah, show me. Stop there. Whose is that?
That's Luther Vandross.
Fantastic. Now, I got to say, at Montserrat, Paul recorded what album there?
It was, well, the one we started at Air. We started at Oxford Circus, so it would have been after Pipes of Peace we did at Oxford Circus. It wasn't that one. What's the album before Pipes of Peace? Yeah, we did it. Paul was there, yeah. He was the only Beatles that went there, I think.
It wasn't Band on the Run, was it?
No, that was their Lagos. They did that.
Yeah, Lagos.
And then we mixed it. We mixed some of it at Oxford Circus and some of it at Abbey Road. We've got the mixer, the TG mixer that was what was in Lagos that did Band on the Run. We've got it at British Grove, Chiswick, the studio, Mark's new studio. We got it in there. That same mixer desk.
And I'm just saying, now you work with Mark Knopfler, don't you?
Yes.
How great's that?
Brilliant. He's the brilliant man. Great. World's greatest guitarist, mate.
Was it Tug of War?
Yeah, Tug of War. That's it. It was Tug of War.
Recorded at Montserrat?
Yes, and the trumpet recorded at Oxford Circus and Montserrat, yeah.
It's just amazing now with the Get Back coming out, the film. We can't wait to see the full concert. And for you to be there down there in the basement, I mean, you must have drank a lot of tea. Would that be right?
Probably, yeah, and a lot of beer afterwards as well, because it was quite a celebration when we did it. I think they were very appreciative of what we did, in the end. But yeah, because it was quite a thing, wasn't it? I mean, looking back on it, it's obviously a thing, but then it was just blooming hard work. I mean, honestly, from morning to night. And Keith, we were all sworn to secrecy about this, obviously. So I remember Keith Slaughter and we were driving to the studio, to Apple Studios, at 4 o'clock in the morning, going through a little town, and we got stopped by the police because we must have looked like a couple of rogues sitting there with all ropes and amplifiers and stuff in the back of the car. And they stopped us and they asked us where we were going. And of course, we couldn't tell them. We didn't dare tell them where we were going and what we were doing. So we just said we're going for a film shoot with EMI. And they didn't believe us. So fortunately, Keith had borrowed a car from EMI itself, from the pool cars, the car lot. So it was owned by EMI. So he said, the only thing I can tell you is that this car is owned by EMI and we're taking it to a shoot. So they went and checked on their car radio and they let us go. They didn't know where we were going.
That's amazing. But let me tell you, to go there at 4 a.m. to go to Apple Studio, that's what you did. This is the day of the actual recording, yeah?
Oh, yeah, this is the day, yeah. We had to go and pick up some stuff that we needed and then, at Abbey Road, and then take it down there.
And then what time did you actually finish? You started at 4 a.m. What time was the end of the day for you that day?
Oh, it would have been midnight or later.
I got to say, Dave, you're fantastic. You're a fantastic
thank you.
Person there, and to work at EMI as a technical engineer. What was your actual proper title there?
As a technical engineer.
Can I ask you, at that time, did EMI have their toilet paper still printed, the word EMI on the toilet paper?
Yes.
How long was that there for? To what year?
As long as I remember.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much.